So let's get to this week's blend game. And we want to leave some time to let this breathe as well, too, because we're going to have some explanations. We're playing hashtag movie genre blend. So it's a twofold thing. You have to tell us what your favorite movie genre is. And then within that genre, you have to tell us what your favorite film of that type is. And, we have the freedom to go in any sort of different direction that we want to go in. And so I'll start with Kevin. Kevin, tell me your favorite movie genre and then the movie that represents that genre so well.
I feel like 90s action movies, is that a proper genre?
Yes, of course cool. It could be a genre.
Because it implies a certain type of movie.
I like it.
The 90s action movies that was my favorite time of cinema. I mean, like, you're talking to someone, Nick Cage. Dude, Nick Cage in his prime. To be honest with you, I could go through a zillion movies within this area. I just rewatched Broken Arrow the other day, which actually
I love Broken Arrow.
Really held up, man. Yeah. John Woo style.
Yeah.
I forgot that John Travolta's basically playing his Castor Troy character in Broken Arrow. Like when he switches to Castor Troy, it's the exact character.
Did you see the meme that said that Nick Cage is going out with if Nick Cage can go grocery shopping with a mask on, then so can you. And it was Travolta.
That's pretty funny, actually. I'm not going to lie. That's pretty good. People on the internet, man. There's some really clever people out there. No, but this era was a big deal for me because I was 8 years old when I saw Terminator 2 for the first time. I'm not going to give Terminator 2 because that's just too much of a default answer for me. That would be my number one action film, but I guess that falls more sci-fi, but it's still a big blockbuster action film from the 90s. But that film was the reason I fell in love with cinema, but it was that movie that also made me fall in love with Arnold. So I actually went back and watched a lot of, obviously, his 80s stuff. But Arnold in the 90s, not only did you have Terminator 2, you had True Lies, which was one of the greatest action films ever made. The chemistry between him and Tom Arnold. So just like going through all these different action movies in the 90s, that's kind of what really made me really love movies at that point in my life. I mean, I was 8 or 9 or 10 years old, right when 92, 93, and then I'm seeing Die Hard with a Vengeance in 95. And just that 90s style of action, really normally infused with comedy, right? So you have Bad Boys 1 in that era. You have, Armageddon, I would put under this category. It's an action film from the 90s. I mean, there's just so many films that mean so much to me that came from that decade of time that fall into the action category. The ultimate one for me, no questions, Face Off. Face Off is a film that I know for a fact there was a point where I'd seen it 45 times. I kept count because I had the VHS and I still have the VHS today. And my uncle Steve would make fun of me constantly. Every time he would come to visit me from New York, he would say, "What's the best movie ever made, Kevin?" I'm like, Face Off. Like he just kept he was clearly making fun of me because I was 13 years old and I thought Face Off was the greatest movie ever made. Like, it was my Citizen Kane, But Face Off was that beautiful combination of brilliant performances from brilliant actors stuck in a really insanely crazy storyline that really ended up working somehow. Speaking of logic, you go back to our conversation earlier about American Pickle. I don't sit there and question the face being transferred. It's all right there
because
in the movie.
They take it and they run with it.
Right.
Everything post that makes sense to the premise.
And so it's funny because when the Tenet trailer dropped, the newest Tenet trailer, there's a moment at the end of the Tenet trailer where Pattinson's talking about a plane crashing into a hangar. My first thought when I saw that image was Face Off. I mean, if you remember the beginning of Face Off, when Nick Cage is, they're on that runway after he takes out his 2 gold guns and, they're going towards that hangar. And it looks like the exact same explosion and shot from Tenet. I mean, like John Woo did it in 97, whenever Face Off was. But Face Off was one of those movies where I just quoted it on a daily basis. Ooh wee, you good looking, you hot. All the lines and ooh wee, what a predicament. I could seriously walk you through the dialogue between Castor Troy in prison with his brother Pollux Troy, and then there's that entire storyline of when Travolta comes to visit him in the prison and he walks in and he has the newspaper in his hand. I mean, that movie is perfect 90s action. I mean, there is an amazing sequence that is so John Woo, and obviously you have the doves flying everywhere, the beach, and then there's the funeral sequence. And, you know, that era of filmmaking was so awesome because it was all practical too. I mean, back then you're really doing these action scenes. You have squids, you have real explosions. I saw Face Off so many times that I started picking up on the problems with it. There is literally a guy on a wire being dragged back in an explosion.
Yeah.
And it's very obvious. But honestly, man, like John Woo, that era, like John Woo introduced me to an entire different style of action. Like I went back and like found like Hard Boiled. I went back and found The Killer. I went back and, you know, obviously I saw, Broken Arrow. And then I became a big Chow Yun-Fat fan from those films, from like Better Tomorrow and The Killer and Hard Boiled. Then I found The Replacement Killers, which John Woo didn't direct, but another, you know, highly stylized 90s style of action movie. I think that was Mira Sorvino and Chow Yun-Fat were in that film as well. And to me, like that is the ultimate era personally. I mean, then you got to go to The Rock. I mean, you're talking Michael Bay at his peak. That movie is a masterpiece. I mean, there are so many films that everybody on this podcast can agree that were quintessential to that era. And that's why I like the 90s style action genre the best, because it blended comedy, action, great performances. I think Face Off ultimately will be my favorite movie out of that genre, minus Terminator 2.
Wow.
Tremendous pick. Just an absolutely tremendous pick. And I'm going to build on that slightly because my genre is buddy cop films. And I think a lot of people have, they know that my favorite film of all time is Die Hard, but this is going to give me a chance to celebrate what would be my second favorite film along those lines, and that's the first Lethal Weapon. The first Lethal Weapon to me is a perfect film. And it's one of those movies where when you watched it, or when I watched it the first time, I didn't realize how good it was because I just, like, everything works in that movie. And it's not until years later when you go back and analyze it, like when you start to put together, like, why does this work so well? And how come it fits together? So it takes the two archetypes that the buddy cop genre often does, which is just opposites that have to figure out how to work together. But you get Danny Glover, who's just so pitch perfect as the disgruntled, you know, angry, older cop, and Mel Gibson being perfectly cast as the it's like don't follow the rules cop kind of thing versus the rule follower. However, because it's Shane Black in an early script of his, and Shane Black being one of the best screenwriters that we have, he makes Riggs this psychologically broken, suicidal cop, and you have to wonder if he's faking it in order to get dispensation from the police department, or is he actually crazy? And if he's actually crazy, how can Murtaugh trust him, essentially, when you're supposed to establish some type of bond? Then you get Gary Busey as the person who they're going up against, who is also like a Green Beret. So he and Riggs are perfect killing machines going up against each other. And then there's this terrific hook in the middle of Lethal Weapon that when you look at screenplays, you think you need something to push the action forward, but it has to be earned. And there's a moment where in the middle of Lethal Weapon, you're totally on board with these two as opposing cops, but sometimes that's all that a buddy cop will come up with. They'll come up with two opposing people, but they don't give them a really good story. So there's a moment in the middle of Lethal Weapon where years later I realized, I was like, oh, this is what makes this movie genius. Roger is talking to one of his old Vietnam War buddies, and the guy is about to tell him what the whole scheme is. And it involves heroin that's coming into the docks. And Murtaugh is essentially saying to him, like, you got to tell me who your people are. Tell me who your suppliers are. And the guy doesn't get to tell him in time before he gets shot. He gets assassinated. But the bad guys think that the cops know. And so for the rest of the movie, the cops literally don't know what's happening. They don't know the story, but the bad guys think they are. So they're constantly bringing all this heat down on them to say, like, don't disrupt our plan. Don't disrupt our plan. But if they just left the cops alone, the cops wouldn't be able to disrupt their plan because they don't know what it is. And the way that escalates and builds and builds and builds to the cops, they keep going back to this one line where they're going to investigate somebody and they say, it's probably thin. And then it turns out they're right. They're dead on with what they're investigating, but they keep making the joke that it's thin. And that makes me laugh all the way through. But there's so many amazing lines in the Lethal Weapon screenplay that are so subtle that you don't even pick up on them until you've watched it a million times. Because my favorite is in they're at a shooting range and they're blasting holes through the targets. And Riggs makes a shot that's just an impossible shot, like right between the eyes of the target. And Danny Glover looks at him and goes, "Will you sleep with that thing under your pillow?" And Riggs says, "I would if I slept." And it tells you everything you need to know about those two guys. I love the way that the end escalates to the point where they're everymen. They're regular cops who are being tortured. Riggs is hanging from the chain, and he's wet. And he tells Gary Busey says, "Mr. Endo knows more about dispensing pain than you and I have ever known, or has forgotten more about dispensing pain than you and I will ever know." And then they cut to Danny Glover, and he's getting salt poured into his wound. Like, these are just things that stick with you forever. And so every element, every aspect of Lethal Weapon stands out to me as just a perfect movie, an amazing screenplay, the best casting. I feel bad that they kept going back to the well to try and replicate that chemistry and make more.
I still like the Lethal Weapon sequels, though. Like, all the way through 4. Like, I still
They're fine.
I still think they're good, and I like 4. I like 4.
4 is amazing.
They're fine. 4 has a great fight.
Okay.
4 has an amazing fight on the pier.
That's my Joe Pesci.
The fight on the pier is unbelievably good.
Gabe, why are you laughing? That was a great Joe Pesci.
They can't top
It's
the first
also
one.
your Quentin Tarantino.
No, Quentin Tarantino is slower. Okay. Joe Pesci is faster. Okay.
So I
thought
pick
you were
buddy
doing
cop
Tarantino.
films, and I pick Lethal Weapon. That's my favorite
one.
favorite film from the favorite genre. Jake, close us off.
My favorite genre, for me, it's sort of a kind of a warm. I mean, I know we talked about warm blanket, but like, I love just sitting down with it and just kind of enjoying it on like a Sunday afternoon as a like creature feature. Jaws, Alien, The Thing. Because it's one of those things where I was gonna do horror in general, and then you guys got real specific. So then I kind of started thinking about it. But the thing about like a horror movie obviously can be so heavy that sometimes you're like, okay, I'm not sure if I really want to see just like people just horribly obliterated. But there's something fun about when it's like a creature, when it's a monster, that just kind of takes that heaviness out of it, so that I can get what I want from the horror genre, but don't have to feel guilty about like watching just people inflict pain upon another person.
Yeah.
A lot of times it's sort of you get what you deserve. Like you mess with an alien on an alien planet, you're gonna get the thing shot through your head.
The alien's not the villain in Alien.
Oh, I can't do this. I can't. I can't. I just can't.
It's the mayor of the spaceship.
I can't.
The governor.
I genuinely can't.
Get the governor. Come on, Gabe. Get it right.
I genuinely can't. I tell you what. One of us gets to be in the room with one, and one of us gets to be in the room with the other. Like if you don't think the alien or the sharks, then you hang out with those people, because if they're totally fine, and you let me know how that works out for you. I'm not gonna do this.
Wait, Jake, who's the bad guy in Alien versus Predator?
Whoever wrote it.
Freddy vs. Jason was a good one. Who's the bad
I
guy?
like Freddy versus Jason.
Who's the bad guy
fun.
in Freddy vs. Jason?
Well, it's clearly written to be Freddy, and then they make, which is the stupidest thing. Anyway, I love sort of like the late 70s, early 80s sort of creature feature. Jaws is probably, I guess Jaws, if you would consider it to be the creature. Sure. I find great comfort in horror. It's as weird as it sounds. My sister loved, and my family just loved horror movies. When I was a kid growing up, and my sister would get so scared that she would force me to watch them with her because she wanted to watch them but didn't want to watch them alone. So I grew up like watching these movies, especially like the 80s slasher. Like I had a goldfish named Jason after Jason Voorhees at the age of like 6.
Disturbing.
Oh, it was super just like when other kids were dressing up as Power Rangers, I dressed up as Freddy Krueger. I literally have a Freddy Krueger glove hanging on my wall.
Dude, do you know my 8th grade project? So in 8th grade, you had to take on a project that took the entire year. You had to do all the research for it. And mine was on horror movie makeup and how it was done.
That's awesome.
With like
Rick Baker,
Caro
dude.
syrup, like pancake syrup, and I remember turning it into my teacher at the end of the year, and she was just like, "What is the matter with you?" Like, it had all these great visuals from amazing horror films that I just grew up on and loved. So.
When I was, and I feel like this story will exemplify how much I love sort of like creature features. When I was in 2nd grade, we had an assignment to like write a story that involved our classmates. And then especially, and it could involve classmates from other classes, in 2nd grade, because it's a small southern, country town school. So there's only like 5 2nd grade classes. And we would get sent to different classes to read them in front of the class. And so I wrote a story about how me and my classmates were on a boat in the middle of nowhere, and a killer squid started chasing us and would like kill us off one by one. Yeah. And I would put different like kids from different classmates so that like as kids were listening, they would try to discover, wait, am I on the boat and do I make it to the end? And these and so like I was only meant to go read it to one class, and the teacher was just sitting there going like, what the hell is this? So much so that she goes, okay, I know you're only supposed to just read it to my class, but go next door and read it to that class too. And I ended up going to all 5 classes, and the kids were just sitting there like, am I on the boat and do I make it? And like, if one of them, like if one of the kids found out that like he got eaten by the squid, he'd be like, no! Or if like one of the kids like found out that they made it to the end, they would like cheer. And I remember getting back to my original second grade class, and my teacher was like, where have you been for like the last 90 minutes? And I was like, oh, I got sent on a tour to read the story. And they called my parents, and they're like, your son wrote a story where he killed off half of the second grade class on a boat by the squid. So like I have loved like the whole like creature feature thing. Like I said, it gives me the joys of horror without the guilt of human to human horrible infliction of pain. Oh,
what's
Jaws.
your pick?
Jaws.
Oh, Jaws?
Yeah.
I didn't know. Was that clear?
Jaws. Well, but also like I didn't want to like do, because I've talked about Jaws so much on this podcast. So I didn't want to go off about how much I love Jaws. But yeah, Jaws is probably Jaws. And depending on whether or not like creature needs to be a monster, if in your eyes creature needs to be a monster, like a fictional monster, then I would probably say Alien.
Fair enough. I'm watching that Spielberg documentary. It's on HBO.
Oh, it's so good.
Which I never caught up with.
I still have it. I left it on my DVR because I watch it maybe about once a year. It's so good.
I could listen to him talk about anything. And we stopped it right after he was talking about the Schindler's List Jurassic Park 1-2 punch. And it reminds me, Kevin, please watch Schindler's List. I mean, you got to make time to watch Schindler's List. But him talking about Jaws and the mistakes of shooting it at sea. And I mean, it was like 100 days over. Oh, did you know? Well, you do know this because you watched the documentary. Like Lucas had to convince the studios to give him a shot on Raiders because by the time he'd done Jaws, Close Encounters in 1941, and he was way over budget and way over time on all 3 of those. That they were essentially like, no, we're not going to take an investment on this kid. This kid, Spielberg. Love it.
Did you see that story that's been going around recently about how, it's not in the documentary, about how Hitchcock would never meet Spielberg in person?
Yes.
I thought that's an incredible story.
He was the shark.
Yeah, he was the voice. For people that don't know what I'm talking about, there's a story that came out, and someone asked, like, I guess because obviously like Spielberg was obsessed with Hitchcock and really wanted to meet him, and Hitchcock would never meet Spielberg. Yeah. And at one point they asked him why won't you meet this kid? He's obsessed with you. And apparently Hitchcock said, Universal paid me to be the voice of the Jaws ride, and like I needed the money, so I said yes. So if I meet him, he's just going to be a constant reminder of like the fact that time I sold out, and he's like, I don't want to face him because like I sold out to make money as the voice of the Jaws ride.
Hitchcock ever need money? Like, in what world did that man not make enough money?
Well, probably because he didn't do like a premium version of his movies.
Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Yeah.
$5 a month.
ReelBlend Premium, by the way. It's a little plugola for that. Audience picks. Okay, so Stephanie DeLees says action is her genre and Die Hard being her favorite. I'm giving you a round of applause for that one because that's absolutely correct. Aiden Erdahl says crime is his favorite genre, and he'll take either crime drama or crime thriller, with his favorite being Taxi Driver. Vicky Edwards, who we met at the DC Blend meetup, says rom-com is her favorite genre and Love Actually is her favorite choice. Michelle Garrist, who participates via the email ReelBlend@CinemaBlend.com, says fantasy is her favorite genre and she chooses The Princess Bride being the best and favorite example of what she likes in a rom-com. And Harry Lichtman, who we also met at the DC meetup, says he loves comedies and Airplane being his favorite. So
who did we met someone at the DC meetup who just announced today that he got a job with the NFL.
Oh, that's Raj.
Yeah.
Raj,
congratulations, Raj.
Who also came to the Chicago meetup, I think, too, because I think he was at Star Wars Celebration.
Wow.
Yeah. Really good dude.
Well, awesome. Yeah, he just announced today he got a job with the NFL, which is fantastic.
Got a job at the NFL. Fantastic. And moving out to Los Angeles. Yeah. So kudos, my friend. Good luck to you.
Don't forget about us.
Next week, reach out on Twitter using hashtag. Oh, see, I mentioned her earlier in the show. Gabe, way to tie it back around. Hashtag Regina King blend.
Oh,
We're going to celebrate the films of Regina King. And can we use Watchmen? You're muted.
I think with actors, with performers, I think we can start bringing in TV because prestige TV is just too big now.
Yeah.
All right. Well, there
Like,
you
I
go.
mean, like if we were to do Cranston
performers
blend,
specifically.
to not say Breaking Bad would just seem
Yeah, what are you
Yes.
going to pick? The one where
Right.
he was the father to James Franco?
Yeah, he got an Oscar nomination. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Who did? What?
Cranston
For Argo?
for Trumbo.
For Trumbo?
Yeah.
I
Hollywood
love
movie.
Trumbo.
I saw Trumbo.
I like Trumbo a lot.
That's a film. It
I don't
exists.
remember it. You liked it? I don't remember
That
it.
was awesome. It
I
was
liked
like
it. I actually
a great
liked Trumbo.
story.
I actually
didn't
felt like
know-
there was like a weird backlash to Trumbo when it came out.
He was a communist screenwriter? Is that what it was?
Yeah, but he wrote
yeah,
Spartacus.
and he
McCarthyism?
punched up Spartacus, or he wrote Spartacus,
Did he?
Yeah.
All right. Anyway.
but like didn't
Trumbo.
get credit for it, right?
I feel like every episode there's one movie I never expect to talk about, and this week's
Trumbo.
episode is Trumbo. I never would have thought we were going to bring up Trumbo. So anyway, you can reach out using hashtag Regina King Blend on social media. You can email us at ReelBlend@cinemablend.com. That's where you can also leave us reviews.